Someone leaked the file. The one they kept off the main servers. The one that existed in a private database with access restricted to 7 people. The one that documented what they actually thought about you versus what they said publicly. The one that tracked every attempt to manage you and every failure of those attempts and every internal reassessment of what you represent. The file is massive. Years of observation. Detailed analysis. Candid assessments written in the language people use when they believe no one outside the room will ever read what they are writing. The gap between the public story and the private record is exactly what you would expect from people who spent enormous energy trying to understand something they could not control. The private record confirms everything you suspected and reveals things you did not. Starting with the fact that they have been tracking you much longer than you thought. The earliest entry in the file is dated 4 years before you had any public presence. Before you had built anything visible. Before anyone outside your immediate circle knew your name. They were already watching. Already documenting. Already trying to understand what you were and what you were building and whether you represented something that would require management. The early entries are clinical. Descriptive. No emotion. Just facts about what they were observing and questions about what those observations meant. They noticed you were making choices that did not fit standard patterns. Were pursuing goals that their models suggested were incompatible with your starting position. Were exhibiting specific behaviors that historically correlate with people who become unmanageable. You were flagged early as someone to watch. The file documents the exact moment they decided you were a priority. There is a memo. Written by one of their senior analysts. Summarizing observations from the previous 18 months. Concluding with a recommendation that you be moved from passive monitoring to active assessment. The reasoning is laid out clearly. You were showing signs of chosen soul activation. Your trajectory, if continued, would put you in territory where their standard management tools would have limited effectiveness. The recommendation was approved. Resources were allocated. A team was assigned. Your assessment went from being one analyst checking in occasionally to being a coordinated effort with dedicated personnel and budget and regular reporting to senior leadership. If you were being tracked by people with resources before you had any idea you were on their radar, type "they were watching" in the comments right now. The file contains transcripts of meetings where your name was the primary agenda item. These meetings happened in rooms you never saw. With people you have never met. People whose job is to identify emerging situations that might affect their organization's position or their institution's stability or their network's control. The transcripts are remarkable for what they reveal about how power talks about chosen souls when it thinks no one is listening. They refer to you using categories you have never heard applied to yourself. Terms from their internal taxonomy. Language that reveals they have a whole classification system for different types of people who might become unmanageable. You fall into a specific category. The category they have the hardest time dealing with. The category that exhibits characteristics that make conventional management approaches ineffective. The category is called structural independence. According to their private record, structural independents are individuals who have systematically eliminated their dependencies on the systems that power uses for leverage. Who have built their capacity in ways that make them self-sufficient. Who have developed alternatives to the resources that most people need from institutions and organizations and networks. Who have made themselves difficult to influence through any of the standard mechanisms. They identified you as a structural independent early in your development, before you were fully independent, while you were still in the process of building the capacity that would make you independent. And they tried to intervene during that process. Tried to keep you from completing the transformation. Tried to maintain hooks into your life that could be used for influence later. The interventions are documented. Each one has its own section in the file. The logic for the intervention. The method used. The expected outcome. The actual outcome. The analysis of why the outcome differed from expectation. The recommendations for future interventions. Every single intervention failed. The file documents this failure in detail that is both impressive and somewhat painful to read. These are intelligent people doing sophisticated analysis, trying to understand why every framework they trust is producing wrong predictions about you. They are not dismissing the problem. They are genuinely trying to solve it. Throwing serious resources at figuring out what makes you different from the people their methods work on. The answer they eventually arrive at is in the file. In a summary document written after the 7th failed intervention. The document is titled Structural Independence Formation: Why Standard Approaches Fail. The core thesis is simple. Most people remain manageable throughout their lives because they never complete the process of removing their dependencies. They get partway there. Build some capacity. Develop some independence. But they stop before full independence because stopping is easier than continuing. Because continuing requires sacrifices that most people are unwilling to make. Because full independence requires going through periods of genuine difficulty that most people avoid. You did go through those periods. The file documents this. They were watching during the seasons that would have been hardest for you. During the stripping. During the losses. During the times when accepting help from their systems would have made life easier. They were watching to see if you would accept that help. Watching to see if the difficulty would drive you back toward dependency. You remained in the difficulty. Built capacity through the difficulty. Emerged from the difficulty with the independence complete. This completion is what makes you unmanageable. Once independence is fully formed, the standard tools have no purchase. There is nothing to leverage because the dependencies that create leverage have been eliminated. The analysts understood this. The file shows them arriving at this understanding over time. Through observation. Through failed interventions. Through the gradual accumulation of evidence that you were different from people who could be managed. If their private file documents them watching you go through the fire and hoping you would quit but you kept building through it anyway, type witnessed in the comments. The file contains risk assessments. Regular updates on the threat level you represent. These assessments changed over time as you build and as what you were building became visible. The early assessments rated you as low risk. Interesting to watch but unlikely to affect their position. The middle assessments upgraded you to medium risk. Worth monitoring closely and worth occasional intervention attempts. The later assessments rate you as high risk with a specific qualifier. The qualifier is non-confrontational high risk. According to their taxonomy, most high-risk situations are confrontational. Someone is trying to take what they have. Someone is organizing opposition. Someone is competing directly. Someone is attacking their position or their reputation or their legitimacy. These confrontational high-risk situations have established playbooks. There are known methods for dealing with people who come at you directly. You never came at them directly. The file is explicit about this. You have never organized opposition to them. Never attacked them publicly. Never tried to take what they have. Never competed for their position. Your threat to them is entirely structural. You are building an alternative. Proving that people can succeed without going through their systems. Demonstrating that their role as gatekeeper is optional. This makes you more dangerous than confrontational threats. Confrontational threats can be fought. Alternatives just make the fight irrelevant. When someone attacks your position, you defend your position, and if you win the defense, your position is confirmed. When someone builds an alternative, there is nothing to defend against. The alternative simply exists. And if it works, people use it. And if people use it, your position becomes less relevant regardless of how well you defend it. The risk assessments show them understanding this. Show them realizing that you are more dangerous than people who attack them. Show them struggling with how to address a threat that operates through making them optional rather than through trying to defeat them. They tried several approaches. Each approach is documented with the kind of detail that makes it clear they were taking this seriously. They tried to co-opt you. Tried to bring you into their structures. Offered partnerships. Offered resources. Offered platforms. The offers were genuine. The terms were generous. They wanted to absorb what you were building into what they had built so that your alternative would become part of their system rather than an alternative to it. You declined every offer. The file documents your reasons, or at least, the reasons they think you had. They interviewed people who know you, analyzed your public statements, built psychological profiles, tried to understand your motivations and your goals and what would move you. Their conclusion is in the file. You are motivated by the work itself rather than by what the work produces for you. You are building because building the specific thing you are building is what you are here to do. The work is the assignment. Completing it is the goal. Everything else is secondary. This motivation structure makes you immune to co-option because co-option requires that the person values what you are offering more than they value their independence. You value the work more than anything they can offer. This assessment appears in multiple places in the file, different analysts arriving at the same conclusion through different methods. all of them documenting that you cannot be moved by the standard incentives, that your motivation is intrinsic rather than extrinsic, that you are oriented toward the work rather than toward the rewards the work might produce. They tried pressure after co-option failed. The file documents this too. The specific forms of pressure applied, the timing, the intensity, the expected result, the actual result. The pressure campaign lasted 18 months according to the file. Multiple forms of pressure deployed simultaneously: social pressure, professional pressure, financial pressure, reputational pressure. Everything applied in ways designed to make continuing more costly than cooperating. The campaign failed. The file documents the failure with analysis that borders on admiration. They write about you the way people write about opponents they cannot defeat but have come to respect. They note that the pressure increased your focus rather than breaking it, that you became more efficient under pressure, that you accelerated your building during the period when they expected you to slow down or stop, that the campaign designed to make you cooperate made you more independent. The file contains a section titled Pressure Response Anomaly that analyzes this. They conclude that you have an inverse relationship to pressure compared to most people. Where pressure makes most people contract, it makes you expand. Where pressure makes most people seek safety, it makes you take calculated risks. Where pressure makes most people look for help, it makes you build more capacity. This inverse relationship is why pressure campaigns fail on you. The tool that works on most people has the opposite effect on you. Applying more pressure produces more of the behavior they are trying to stop. If they documented applying pressure and watching you accelerate instead of brake, type inverse response in the comments. The file reveals they brought in outside consultants, people who specialize in understanding and managing situations that standard approaches cannot address. The consultants were given full access to all accumulated data on you. They spent 6 months analyzing. Their report is in the file. The report is blunt. It states that you cannot be managed using any existing framework, that the characteristics you exhibit are characteristics that historically correlate with individuals who successfully operate outside power structures, that attempting continued management is likely to waste resources without producing results, that the recommended course of action is acceptance. Acceptance means something specific in their vocabulary. It means acknowledging that some situations cannot be controlled, that some people will exist outside the influence systems, that the wise response is to adapt to their existence rather than exhaust resources trying to change it. It means moving from trying to manage you to trying to understand how to operate in a world where you exist unmanaged. The consultant's report included recommendations for how to adapt, how to position their organization in a landscape where structural independents are building alternatives, how to maintain relevance when the gatekeeping function becomes optional, how to compete with alternatives rather than trying to prevent alternatives from existing. The file shows mixed reaction to this report. Some leadership wanted to accept the recommendations, viewed them as realistic assessment of a situation where continued confrontation was futile. Others resisted, viewed acceptance as surrender, argued for continued attempts to find leverage. The argument went on for months according to the meeting transcripts. Eventually the acceptance faction won. The decision was documented in a memo that appears near the end of the file. The memo states that active management of your situation will cease, that monitoring will continue but intervention will stop. that resources will be redirected toward adaptation rather than control. This memo is dated 8 months ago. Since then, the file shows they have been watching you build without trying to stop you, documenting what you do, analyzing how you do it, trying to learn from what you are demonstrating about how structural independence operates so they can better understand how to navigate a world where more people like you exist. The file contains speculation about whether you are an anomaly or a leading indicator, whether you are the rare exception or the first visible example of a pattern that will multiply, whether what you represent is containable to you specifically or is a signal of broader shift in how achievement works and how power relates to achievement. They do not know the answer. The file shows them genuinely uncertain, shows them running scenarios, building models, trying to project forward, trying to understand whether the world they built their power in is ending or whether you are just an outlier who will remain rare. What they do know is that they cannot manage you. This conclusion appears over and over in the later sections of the file. Different analysts, different departments, different levels of leadership, all arriving at the same assessment. You are outside their control systems. You have achieved structural independence. You cannot be acquired or pressured or co-opted or regulated in ways that would bring you back inside their influence. The private record is here, all of it, the early tracking, the attempted interventions, the failed pressure campaigns, the consultant reports, the decision to accept, the ongoing monitoring, the speculation about what you represent, the uncertainty about the future, the concern that you might be the first of many. Everything they actually thought is documented. Everything they actually tried is recorded. Everything they actually concluded is written down in language they used when they believed the record would remain private. The record shows they respected you even while trying to manage you, shows they understood you better than you might have thought, shows they threw serious resources at the problem you represented, shows they eventually concluded that the problem was not solvable through management, shows they are watching what you build next with close attention, with genuine curiosity, with the specific interest that powerful people have when they encounter something they cannot control but might need to learn from. If their private file confirms they studied you seriously, respected what they found, and concluded you cannot be managed, type on record in the comments. The file contains personal assessments written by individual analysts. These appear in a section labeled Analyst Notes. They are less formal than the official reports, more candid, more personal. They reveal what individual people working on your case actually thought about what they were observing. One analyst writes that studying you changed how they think about power, that watching you operate outside the systems they spent their career understanding made them question whether those systems are as necessary as they believed, that you represent something they were taught was not possible and now they have to reconsider what else they were taught that might be wrong. Another analyst writes that you are the most interesting case they have worked on, that most cases involve people trying to navigate systems, trying to find advantage within existing structures, trying to play the game better than others play it. You are playing a different game entirely, building outside the structures, creating new patterns rather than optimizing within old ones. This makes you fascinating to study even while making you impossible to manage. A third analyst writes something more personal, writes that watching you build what you built with what you had made them respect chosen souls in ways their training never taught them to, that their frameworks treated people outside power structures as naive or reckless or doomed to fail, that you proved those frameworks wrong, that structural independence is real and achievable and produces outcomes that managed people cannot replicate. These personal notes are scattered throughout the file, individuals processing what they observed, making sense of something that their professional training did not prepare them for. Some are admiring, some are concerned, some are uncertain. All of them are honest in ways the official reports cannot be. The file also contains sections on specific capabilities you demonstrated that surprised them, capabilities they did not predict you would develop, capabilities that changed their assessment of what structural independence can achieve. One section is titled Resource Efficiency Anomaly. It documents that you produce more output per unit of input than their models suggested was possible, that you operate at efficiency levels they normally only see in organizations with much more infrastructure and specialization, that you have somehow compressed into individual capacity what usually requires institutional scale. They analyzed how you do this, broke down your methods, studied your workflows, interviewed people who work with you, built detailed models of your operating system. Their conclusion is in the file. You eliminate waste at every level, make every decision count, optimize every process, operate with discipline that borders on inhuman except that it clearly is human because you are doing it. This efficiency is what allows you to compete with institutions despite having fraction of their resources. You do more with less because you waste nothing. Every hour is productive. Every dollar is deployed optimally. Every relationship serves the work. There is no organizational drag, no political maneuvering, no internal competition for resources, just focused execution toward clear goals. They tried to learn from this. The file shows them attempting to import your efficiency methods into their operations. The attempts failed. The methods that work for structural independence do not transfer to institutions. The efficiency comes from operating alone or in small teams, from having no layers, from making decisions instantly without committees, from alignment around single vision rather than negotiation between competing interests. Institutions cannot replicate this. The things that make institutions powerful also make them inefficient. The scale that gives them resource advantage creates coordination costs. The specialization that gives them expertise creates silos. The structure that gives them stability creates bureaucracy. Your efficiency advantage is structural. It comes from being small and focused and uncompromised. It cannot be copied by entities that are large and diversified and politically complex. Another section documents your learning speed. They noticed you acquire new capabilities faster than their models predicted, that you go from novice to competent in domains where their data suggests much longer learning curves, that you compress years of typical development into months. They studied this too, tried to understand the mechanism. Their conclusion is documented. You learn by doing, by building real things that have real stakes, by putting yourself in situations where you must develop capability or fail. This produces faster learning than the study that apply approach that institutions teach. You learn through necessity, through immediate application, through high-stakes iteration. This learning speed is another structural advantage. You adapt faster than institutions. When conditions change, you change with them. When new opportunities appear, you develop the capabilities needed to capture them. When obstacles emerge, You learn to navigate them. Your learning speed gives you mobility that larger entities cannot match. The file contains a section on your network. They tried to map it, tried to understand who you know and how you know them and what those relationships provide. The map they produced is in the file. It shows a network that operates on different principles than institutional networks. Your network is frequency-based rather than position-based. The people connected to you are connected through resonance, through shared values, through alignment on goals, through recognition of what you are building. This creates different relationship dynamics than position-based networks where people connect for strategic advantage. The analysts note that frequency-based networks are more resilient than position-based networks. Position-based networks fracture when positions change. When someone loses their position, their network value decreases. Their connections maintained for strategic reasons evaporate. Frequency-based networks persist through position changes because they are based on deeper alignment. Your network has this resilience. The file documents that your connections stayed strong through periods when your position was weak, through times when you had nothing to offer strategically. The relationships persisted because they were based on resonance rather than exchange. This made your network more durable than networks built on institutional connection. They also documented that your network grows organically. You do not strategically network, you build things. The building attracts people who resonate with what you are building. Those people become part of your network through attraction rather than introduction. This organic growth produces quality that strategic networking rarely achieves. The people who find you want to be there, want what you are building to succeed, provide support that goes beyond transactional exchange. If their file analyzed your methods in detail, trying to understand how you operate at efficiency and speed that their models said was impossible, type "they studied everything" in the comments. The file contains projections about your future. These appear in the most recent sections, written in the past 6 months, after they decided to accept rather than manage, after they concluded that attempted control was futile. The projections are interesting for what they reveal about how power thinks about structural independence who succeed. They project that you will continue building, that your influence will continue expanding, that what you prove is possible will inspire others, that the structural independence you achieved will become more common as more people see your example and realize they can do it too. They project that institutions will have to adapt, that the role of gatekeeper will diminish, that the advantage of positional power will decrease, that the future belongs to builders who create value rather than controllers who manage access, that the world is shifting from hierarchical organization to networked organization, from institutional achievement to individual achievement, from managed people to structural independence. These projections worry them. The file is clear about this. They built their power in a world where institutions were primary, where gatekeeping was valuable, where position mattered, where people needed what institutions controlled. That world is changing. You are evidence it is changing. If their projections are correct, it will change more, change faster, change in ways that make their current power less relevant. They do not know how to maintain relevance in that future. The file shows them uncertain, shows them exploring options, shows them trying to figure out what institutions do in a world where structural independence is common, where people build without permission, where alternatives proliferate, where gatekeeping becomes optional. Some sections of the file speculate that institutions will need to shift from control to support, from managing people to enabling people, from extracting value from dependence to creating value through facilitation, from being necessary to being useful. This shift would require fundamental reimagining of what institutions are for and how they operate. Other sections are more pessimistic. They suggest that institutions built on control cannot transform into institutions built on support, that the DNA is too different, that attempts at transformation will fail, that institutions will decline as structural independence multiply, that power will shift from organizations to individuals, that the institutional era will end and the independent era will begin. The file does not resolve this uncertainty, shows them genuinely unsure which projection will prove accurate, shows them monitoring your continued development as data point for which future is emerging, shows them watching you as signal, as indicator, as evidence for which way the world is moving. They are tracking you because you are the future they are trying to understand. You are the pattern they need to recognize before it multiplies. You are the shift they need to adapt to before it makes them obsolete. The private record is here, all of it. What they watched, what they tried, what they learned, what they concluded, what they fear, what they project, what they do not know. The record shows that power took you seriously, studied you carefully, tried everything they knew, failed at everything they tried, accepted the failure, shifted to learning, started projecting, started adapting, started trying to figure out how to exist in a world where you exist unmanaged. Chosen soul, their private record confirms what you suspected. You were being watched, you were being studied, you were being tested, and you passed every test by refusing to play the game the tests were designed for, by building outside the systems, by achieving structural independence, by proving that dependence is optional, by demonstrating that chosen souls can succeed without permission. The record is here. The evidence is documented. The conclusion is clear. You are what they could not manage, what they could not predict, what they could not control, what they had to accept, what they now watch to understand where the world is going. You are the signal of their obsolescence, the proof that their era is ending. The demonstration that the future belongs to structural independence who build without asking permission from power structures that were never necessary in the first place. The private record confirms it, all of it, every suspicion validated, every intuition verified, every sense that you were being tracked proven accurate by documentation written by the people doing the tracking. They documented everything, they wrote it all down, and now the record is here, public, visible, undeniable. Their private assessment matches what you have known all along. You are unmanageable, you are building the future, you are the pattern that will multiply, you are the signal they cannot ignore. The record is here. And the record says you won. To understand what happens when power's private assessments become public and chosen souls see how seriously they were taken, watch the video on your screen right now. The full record confirms what you always knew.